I think the basic answer to the question, who is man, is that man is the image of God. There are obviously a lot of ways you can talk about who we are. We're complex beings. But the very first thing that Scripture says about us, the very first way it identifies us, is saying that we are created in the image and the likeness of God. And that's a really profound thing. Before it even tells us that we are created from the dust of the ground. I mean, that's part of who we are too. I mean, we're like the other animals, made from the stuff of this earth. And yet the thing that Scripture first wants us to know is that we are created in the divine image and likeness. Of course, that raises a lot of questions about what the image and likeness is. And if we look at that opening reference to the image of God in Genesis 1, what seems to be highlighted there is the fact that God has called us to exercise dominion in this world. A lot of times, Christian theologians have talked about, well, what does it mean to be the image of God? Well, we are rational, and we have will, and we have moral capabilities, and all that is true, and all that. I don't see how we could actually be image bearers of God if those things weren't true of us. But it is interesting that the thing that Genesis 1 highlights is that we are called to exercise dominion in this world, to be fruitful, to multiply, to fill the earth, to subdue the other creatures. And of course, that doesn't mean it's some sort of a tyrannical kind of authority, but it's a benevolent authority. God has called us to be, in a sense, kings under him. God is the ultimate ruler of all things, but he's called us to exercise a dominion faithfully under him in this world. And of course, human beings fell. Human beings fail to exercise that authority, and yet we continue to see in Scripture the Bible calls us the image bearers of God. Even in our fallen state, we remain image bearers of God in an important sense. And yet one aspect of the good news of the gospel that's proclaimed in Scripture is that we are renewed in the image of God. You find that in Colossians 3 and Ephesians 4, and you think about Romans 8, which talks about Christ as the firstborn among many brothers. We are renewed in the likeness of God through Christ. 1 Corinthians 15 speaks about just as we have borne the image of the first man, Adam, so we will bear the image of the man from heaven, Christ. And that still has that call to be something. I think that's an important part, is that to be an image bearer of God is not just to have certain attributes. To be an image bearer of God is to be called into God's service. And since that's essential to being human. And so when we read the New Testament about our renewal in the image of God, it speaks about being renewed in knowledge and righteousness and holiness. That's what we're called for. We're called to be renewed in that service, both in this age and ultimately in the age to come.